How to deliver an impactful presentation and workshop and negotiation. This is the topic of today's live. And I'm so excited. We're going to have Bogdan as a guest to talk about the impactful presentation, workshop, and negotiation. And therefore, I'm going to rebroadcast one of the first episodes of the IBD Hub. And this one is great. And just before I do that, I just wanted to announce the weekly events that we have. So every day at this time at 4 o'clock, we're going to have daily lives where I give you tips about business for architecture and real estate. And then on Wednesday, we are having Ollie and Ali and Guillaume that are going to come on the weekly podcast to talk about innovation and how new technologies can transform the field of architecture. So I'm super excited about that. And then on Thursday on Clubhouse, we're going to talk about crowdfunding and how to use that for architects. So if you go on my story on LinkedIn, you'll be able to see all the events and the timings and everything. And I'm just going to put you through with Bogdan and the episode that we have put together. It has been almost a year, if I'm not mistaken. So please sit down, enjoy, take notes. There's so much content in here. And I see you just afterwards. Fair enough. Thank you so much for coming on to our new episode.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you here as an expert for public speaking, negotiation, and much more. Would you like to maybe introduce yourself in more detail and explain us what you do?
Not really. It's the one thing I never really like because, I mean, you know me very well, and most people who know me know that I don't really like to talk about myself. Yeah. Because I don't think that it is about me. I think it's about, whatever learnings I can share and, the people that can learn from them. So in general, I really don't like to talk about myself like that. But maybe it makes sense to introduce a little bit to explain the background. I have a background in neuropsychology, neuroscience, and I've done a lot of neuromarketing. And recently went a lot into digital psychology, or how to be memorable and impactful online because of what's happening right now in the last few months. And of course, for 17 years I've been in the events and production industry. I've worked in every industry with every person. I've done shows, productions, events, conferences, and there of course I've done a lot of speaker coaching, pitching. We had to pitch for events. We had a 98% success rate, which was very humbling. Basically everything we would pitch, we would win, more or less. So we, gathered a lot of information in terms of how do you present, how do you facilitate, stakeholder management, how do you negotiate, what images work, your voice, and the overall context, how do you use context. And was lucky enough to be in so many different industries that pretty much I know very well what works in every given industry and every specific industry as a result.
Yeah. No, I've participated to many of your workshops actually, especially for public speaking and the negotiation part. But we also had a look together at how to make an impactful workshop with clients. So that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about today, because most of our audience is are architects or in the construction industry. And sometimes they come to me with questions about how to really be impactful during a pitch, how to present a project without being boring. And what I've seen from my experience is that many people focus on little details of the design and really dive into the project because, of course, they spend time and efforts to make this project happen. But that maybe is not necessarily what the client is interested about. So I was wondering if you could maybe advise us on what you think is best
Absolutely. And this doesn't happen only in the, in your industry. It basically happens in most industries where people focus on the how and the what. How, what. But they don't bother for a second to actually ask, the counterparty or the people on the other side of the table if that's what they actually want or that's what they actually need. So they go there, they mumble, because that's what I call, they go into detail about things that nobody asked necessarily, and then they lead a conversation in that way. And what happens then, people who are there like, okay, well, they're not really going to answer what we want, but at least let's just go in that direction. And then they have a conversation, they're convinced that it went great. But it went great in their direction. It didn't mean that they answered the questions that the client had. And then afterwards they get a call that they didn't get a pitch. Or. And, there is a way how to change that pattern and, that narrative. And that is by asking the why. And going to your client or to your customer or to your potential customer, right, if we're pitching, and saying, okay, why are we doing this? What are your goals? What are your objectives? What do you need? How do you need it? Let's be honest. And the more answers you give us, the more practical we can do this thing. A lot of people don't ask it because they're terrified that people might answer something that they don't have as a solution. But if that is the case, why do you even go to pitch? And again, I've seen this in a lot of industries happening. We forget the why, and we forget about the fact that this is supposed to be a partnership, and a partnership, starts with learning about each other. And how you learn about each other is not by telling about your services and I did this, I did that. They know what you did. That's why you're invited to the table, Maybe it's time you start to ask them about who they are, what they need, what their wishes are, and all those details. And of course, very important, you go into those specifics. I'm not saying specifics do not matter. Specifics do matter, but the relevant specifics. Let them ask you what they need to hear, and you can always add stuff that you want them to hear. But it has to be relevant to what they need.
Yeah. Well, what I personally see happening is that most architect or most construction company, the how and the what, they are very similar from one another, right? So the clients sometimes get applications from architects or competition designs, and they all look extremely similar because the how and the what, at the end of the day, you build a building and you answer to the program that the client gave you on a piece of paper. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't make it easy for the client to pick which one, actually. And I think that's maybe where the why comes in, like really giving a feeling and a story about your project and integrating some keywords of the client that he put in the brief in order for him to perceive that you understood what he wanted.
Correct. The difference between listening to understand and listening to reply. Unfortunately, most people listen to reply, they don't listen to understand, which means when you listen to understand, when someone asks a question, you might want to take like a second or 2 seconds of a break to take in the question and then to come with the answer. That is listening to understand, which means, you listen actively and then you actually come with an answer to that specific question. Listening to reply is even interrupting the person while asking the question or being very anxious for that question to end so you can answer. Have you really thought it through? And that's the difference. And a lot of people are saying, yeah, but everyone is doing it like this. And it always takes me back to something that my mom told me when I was very young and we were very poor, ex-communist country like everyone else. And I would go to her when I was 11 or 12 and complain that I only have 1 pair of jeans when all my colleagues had 2 or 3 pairs of jeans. And Mom, why can't I have a second or third pair of jeans? I was 11, mind you. I haven't seen a banana by then. I saw a banana for the first time when I was 13. Anyway, and my mom kept on telling me, well, if everyone goes at the edge of a cliff and they all jump off that cliff, will you jump off the cliff as well?
No.
And I said, well, no, why? So then she said, then why would you want to be exactly like everyone else?
Yeah.
And this is something that kind of, defined me, personally and professionally. And I always say this to people. When people are saying, yeah, but everyone does the same thing. And I'm like, okay, so, if they're all going to jump off a cliff, are you going to jump off a cliff as well? If everyone is putting a point to a building, a corner to a building, are you going to do the same corner? I thought that actually it's supposed to be unique. It's supposed to be different. So if you want to be unique and different, why do you focus on doing the same thing that almost everybody does? It's such an ironic thing. We all want to be different and original and unique, yet we all want to do exactly the same thing that everyone else does.
Yeah.
When it comes to pitching, I don't get it. That's not how you win a pitch.
Yeah. And how do you think we win?
Differentiate yourself from your competitors. How you differentiate yourself from your competitors is by going and asking your potential client or customer, why are you doing this? What are your pains? What are your fears? What are the past experiences? Why are we here? Maybe you had the same partner for 20 years. Why do you invite us? Do you invite us just because you want to, it's part of your internal process, or do you invite us because you have a problem with your long-lasting partner? How did they disappoint you? How can we make sure that we don't do the same mistake? What do you need? It's very rare that people ask, what do you need? They say, we offer this and we have that and this is this building. Did I ask you? What do you need? Start with that. What do you need? Also because, it's very interesting to focus on that. A lot of the briefings are subjective. And sometimes you go to a solution, to a subjective briefing that has been written by a different team, and now you're meeting different people in that pitch or meeting or whatever, and there maybe they don't even associate entirely with that brief. So take that brief and say, we read this, however, your building looks like this, or we read this, but you're dressed like that. We see quite some contradictory items. Why is that? What do you need? Why is it like this? Why? And let me tell you, people absolutely love that, because if you say, I'm here because I really want to understand, and I really need to understand who you are and what you wish and how to help, that is what gave us a 98% success rate on pitches.
Yeah. No, I also, I wanted to ask you also about the workshop environment. So, because many of us have to be kind of a leader and facilitator at meetings with clients and stakeholders. And most of the time, it is extremely complex, and each group of stakeholders have their own idea of what should be in the building or how the design should look like. And we need to be kind of mediators. And I was wondering, how would you advise people to act in these situations?
Well, when it comes to such meetings, the art of facilitation is something very complex. And it has to start with intent. You really want to go there. If you go there, you really, really want to facilitate in a way that is, good and positive for everybody involved. And my question is always, do you go there to facilitate, or do you go there to influence or to manipulate? And that is the first question. Either way, whatever that is, I'm not here to judge, but then adapt your facilitation skills to whatever, reasons that you have. But first of all, start with the why for yourself. Why am I doing it, right? How do I want the result to be at the end of the 2, 3, 8, 6 months? So basically go backwards. Most people, I call it plan, produce, perform. People produce and perform, but they don't plan. And that planning part is so important. And, the irony when it comes to architecture, right? The planning part is such a fundamental, the measurement and everything, calculations. Yet when we go into such workshops, we don't plan. Well, you fail to plan, you plan to fail. How am I going to facilitate it? Who are the stakeholders? Who is in that meeting? I remember when we did the one-on-one together, I had asked a lot of questions about who is going to be in the meeting, where are they from, what is their cultural background, what are their expectations, with who other companies have they worked, what is their experience, what do they expect, do you know what they expect, did you ask them what they expect, or do you assume what you expect? So all these things, the more you plan in advance, the easier you make it on site. Number one. Number two, I tell you one thing, a client, a potential client, loves it when you go there and you ask questions showing that you really listened to, you researched about them, you researched the people, and they say, oh wow, how do you know that? And you say, well, I did my homework. It is very important to be here prepared, and we prepared before this meeting. They will always put a big check on your list, because this is what people love. This is what people very rarely get. So this preparation is so important. And of course, then it links, from the facilitation, you link to stakeholder management. How do you manage those stakeholders? Who are those stakeholders there? Are the decision makers in that workshop? How do you make sure the decision makers are there? If they're not there, how do you make sure that whatever you discuss is being taken to the decision makers? How many different roles of decision are there? You need to make this easy for yourself and for them as well. And the more you are in control of this knowledge and this information, the easiest it is for you to actually, really ace that workshop. Workshops are very difficult. I'm not going to hide that, and we should never take them easy. We should prepare a lot. We should be ready for a lot of different elements. But again, if you do that, then you have the highest chance possible of, making it very successful, that work.
Yeah, for sure. And so that, because we always come into the room with several design options. But from what I hear, from what you say, we should already know which option we would want the client to pick, right?
One of the things that I see very, very often is that people go with one option in mind and they're fixed only on making that happen. But on the other side of the negotiation table, because let me tell you, everything is a negotiation. You go into a workshop, it's a negotiation. You go to buy bread, it's still some sort of a negotiation. Every sort of exchange or report you have with another person or people, there is some sort of a negotiation happening there, because it's one of the oldest ways how we interact with each other. Neanderthal throws the bone goes back, bam, you have a successful negotiation. You should always go with two, not one, but two possible scenarios that you like, both, which means you go there with 3 options or with 4 options, totally up to you, but make sure that there are 2 of them that you actually are okay with, because no matter which of the 2 will be chosen by the client, you're still fine with it, and you still calculated it. Will it take more time to prepare 2 options? Yes. Will it be more successful for you? Absolutely. And I see this a lot, and I'm glad you mentioned this, Giulia. I see this a lot of people going with one solution, and they go there and they try to push on that solution on the client. You should give free will. And no matter what they choose, you're fine with either of them.
Yeah. It's also, I'm also curious to know, like, how would you, because most of the meetings that we have, sometimes it's a waste of time. No one takes not the right decision, but takes decision in general. Architecture is quite subjective, so there is no right and wrong. But I see that there is always meetings planned every week or every month about a project, but it just doesn't go necessarily forward.
No.
So how do you think we could shrink this process in a way?
This is one of those questions, and again, those who know me, they know that one of my favorite answers is it depends. And I'm never giving such an answer to such a question, because, as I always say, it depends. It depends on so many different factors. Who are the stakeholders? For example, where is the meeting taking place? Why are those meetings happening? Is it in the morning? Is it in the afternoon? Is it in the evening? What kind of meeting that is? What kind of interaction do you have? What kind of engagement? Where are they coming from? What is their cultural background? What are their expectations? What are your expectations? What is your cultural background? Can you even have a conversation with them? Because if you're Dutch and they're British, you might have a problem already from cross-cultural differences. There's so many different things that you need to keep in mind. So that's why I always answer to it depends. And my recommendation there is always pause, take a step back, prepare, and understand all these elements and why you are doing this. Because if you keep on going there, as if you're going to the next meeting and to the next meeting to the next meeting, you're going to have 35 meetings. You're wasting their time, you're wasting your time, and you're not going anywhere. Go there with the purpose of shortening the amount of meetings just by asking the right questions, by creating the right engagement, by creating the right interaction. So again, you see, it goes into, a lot of people think that if you put a lot of time into the preparation time, then you have to add also preparation time next to the 200 meetings you're going to have. Incorrect. The more time you put into the preparation part, the more you're shortening the repetition of events that happen, and you're much more in control, let's say, of the narrative. So, we need to reconsider these kind of things. For as long as we're going to go, just going with the flow, we're never going to be able to control the narrative.
Yeah, and I think that also ties in with the right balance between being a facilitator and a leader in a meeting. I don't know what you think about it, but I just think you need the right amount of both in order to lead the client somehow to take a decision. So
correct. This leads very, very much into credibility. A lot of people think that you showcase your credibility by talking about yourself for 20 minutes. I have been recently in a workshop where the facilitator, which was anything but a facilitator, the gentleman spoke for 47 minutes about himself. The first 47 minutes, he spoke about himself. It was supposed to be a 4-hour workshop, interactive. 1 hour of the 4, he spoke about himself. It wasn't even that interesting. Next to the 47-minute that I wanted to literally chew on my wrists and suck on my own blood. I hope that's visual enough. This is not how you develop credibility. If you want to be truly a facilitator, a good facilitator will facilitate a conversation, will engage everyone, and he or she will show their expertise by bringing subtle examples from their own experience to support the conversation. You never make it about yourself. Facilitation is not about you. It's about everyone in the room, and in a very smart way, you bring elements from your own experience. You bring elements from past projects. You talk about something, you say, oh yeah, this reminds me of a past project that we had, Rather than, oh yeah, and we had this project, and let me tell you about this project because I think it's interesting for you. Sorry, nobody cares. The title of my next book, whenever I'm going to write a book, sorry, nobody cares. And this is where people know that I'm very flexible, and I'm very open, and I'm very, but I'm also very
straight,
direct and straightforward. Yeah. And very often I tell people, nobody cares.
Yeah.
So again, it is very much about this expertise and facilitation. If we facilitate well, we will give much more of our credibility than talking about ourselves and showing millions of slides of stuff we've done in the past. Nobody cares. We did not invite you there to massage your ego. Sorry. Quite the contrary. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see with pitching. People start with talking about themselves rather than talking about, who invited them there, and only at the end be humble and, bring a little bit about yourself. If they ask, and guess what? They always ask. If you don't start mumbling about yourself, they will always ask. No. Otherwise, they're like, okay, I've had enough. 47 minutes.
Yeah, well, the ego, especially in our field, is extremely present.
Absolutely, especially in the. I've worked with architects. I worked in a few projects with architects, and I've been brought a few times because I've actually been brought there to facilitate. It was like Lord of the Rings, when the gathering of all the big shots were there. And everyone was fighting. It was like a US presidential convention where all the candidates were fighting for me time because everyone wanted to talk a little bit more about themselves and what they did. And I was like, I get it. You're all great. We're here because we're all great. How about we talk about something less about than how great you are? And almost everyone, and maybe that's an extreme case, but almost everyone was just grabbing that me time just to talk about their achievements. And I was like, sorry.
I think that's very representative of architecture and construction meetings.
It's like, I know who you are. That's the reason you're here. I invited you because I already know who you are. Yeah. If I want to hear more about you, I will have a one-on-one conversation and I will ask about you. But if I invite you to join a workshop, it's because I want your expertise and your expert opinion to brainstorm together and to do something together. I'm not inviting you, Once again, sorry, nobody cares.
Yeah, I've been in a meeting once where the developer and the architect did not agree between them, and we're in the same team to pitch to the client. And it came to an ego-centric war where the architect started like drawing on the floor as a protest to what the developer was saying to the client. So the architect was just on the floor pretending to sketch another project because he didn't have time to listen to the developer pitching to the client.
Isn't it wonderful that, you know, you officially past childhood at the age of 11 or 12, that you behave like a spoiled brat? Nobody needs a spoiled brat. Nobody wants to work with a spoiled brat either. And I know this might sound a little bit, but you know, you invited me. So look, for a lot of people, very often people don't want to hear certain things. There is a God complex in many industries. Architecture, the architecture world is one of them, where you have this God complex and everyone wants to be the God of thunder, the God of cement, the God of sand, and the God of water. You know what? There's a reason nobody believes in gods anymore. There were too many and they were too full of themselves. Didn't work.
Yeah. And what do you think about hierarchy when it comes to those meetings? Because in my experience, like if the big boss was going to the meeting would take a different turn than if it was a project manager, for instance.
Right. And again, I can talk from my own experience when I've been part of some of these. I've been part of some of these meetings, and I do remember one that was in San Francisco. It was almost surreal. We were on the 35th or 39th floor, whatever, you know, in San Francisco, in this gorgeous meeting space. There were around 18 people around the table, around an oval table, and then the C-something-O joined, and the chief architect officer, or you know, something like this, with one of those C things that I didn't hear before, and I was like, see what? Oh, anyway. And there was a pretty cool conversation before those two people joined. The moment they joined, suddenly it was a masquerade of, it was just weird. And maybe I wouldn't have experienced it that weird if I wouldn't have been with the same people before the two joined.
Yeah.
And then the two joined, and even their body language changed, and you know, like, you know, all of that. See, so funny. And people were doing an introduction around the table. I don't think I said much because in general, you know, like I said, I don't really like to introduce myself. And then you should see how it was so weird and unproductive and hierarchical. And then at one point I said, I'm sorry, I am one of your partners. You flew me from Amsterdam. And it's still morning, so I'm still quite, you know, quite active. But the later it gets, the more jet lagged I'm going to be. And you paid quite some money for me to be here. This meeting is not going anywhere. And I'm sorry to tell you, you know, I'm coming from the Netherlands. I'm very direct. Before you two came, actually there was quite a conversation. The moment you two entered, everyone changed. What is up with that? Why are you all changing? Are they not normal human beings? And everyone was like this. Everyone's like, oh my God. And I was like, listen, I'm one of your contractors. You pay me. You paid me for this anyway. If you're going to tell me to leave, I'm going to leave. You paid me anyway. But for the sake of having an interaction and an engagement and a conversation, you brought me here because I have quite some knowledge. How about we make sure that we harness that shared knowledge that everyone has here, and you leave the titles at the door? I said, how about everyone takes their name cards? Said we take the name cards, we put the name cards outside the door, and then we come back as normal people and we work. Then everyone like looked at me, looked at the two, and the two stood up, they took their name tags, they dropped the name tags outside, they opened the door, they dropped the name tags, everyone went, dropped the name tags, we all came back, and then you should have seen how everyone was like sitting relaxed and everyone was laughing and joking because we literally put the hierarchy and the titles outside. Now, was I expecting that will happen? Yes. Why? Because I researched the two people, the 2C whatever, and I did a behavioral profiling, and I knew exactly that is what they are going to do, because they were the type of people who would never kick me out of a meeting because they would say something about them, going back to ego, going back to stakeholder management, going back to negotiation, going back to no your audience in advance.
Right, so this was a little bit of the episode 5 of the IBD podcast. So if you want to see the rest, I'd encourage you to go back to her episode. They're available on Apple Podcast, YouTube, and Spotify. So I'm just laughing because this was one of the very, very first episode that we did. The first one, I think, with the camera on as well. So I'm just laughing at myself because for me it was the first experiences with the camera and with the microphones and so on. Bogdan is doing great because he's like he's already used to it for so many years, but for me it was one of the very first ones. So good times. But essentially you have had some of the most amazing tips about impactful presentation, workshop, and negotiation. So always be aware of your why. Always be aware that what is important is your client and the problem that you're trying to solve for them and how you're going to solve it for them, rather than just talking about yourself. And for the workshops, it is always challenging to find a good balance between the people. But it's about really putting forward the right questions so that everybody can take some decision making. And I would advise you to definitely have someone that is there to be kind of the referee in those workshops where it can get out of hand. So that was for today. I think I will do it more often to rebroadcast some of the episode or some of the clips, because it's always nice to see them again. And I think because they were the very first ones that we had, some of you may have never seen them before. So it's definitely amazing. I hope you enjoyed it. Tomorrow we have another daily live at 4. And then again, Wednesday, we have the live with Guillaume and Ali about innovation within the architectural field and how to think outside the box. And on Thursday, we have a clubhouse room, part of the Business for Architects Club. And we're going to talk about crowdfunding and how architects can benefit from it. So look at my story to see the times and be more aware of it. And I see you tomorrow.